What is up, guys? It is Will Sports, and today I'm going to be talking about week one of the college football season. It is officially ended yesterday with Clemson and Duke. It was a wild week. Great to see college football back. Obviously, everyone has been waiting on it, and we had so many great moments, great games, big storylines, upsets. It was a crazy week. So the first game I'm going to talk about is last night's game, which was Clemson and Duke. Since it was the most recent. Clemson obviously got it handed to them by Duke, a basketball school. They lost 28-7, and Duke was pretty. I mean, the whole way you just felt like Clemson was a little off. Clemson's offense never seemed to be able to get it going. Duke, from the very beginning, seemed comfortable and seemed like, they were going to come out and be the more physical team, the more aggressive team, and they were that for the most part. The Clemson, like I said, their offense was very stagnant the entire way. They only passed for 209 passing yards. Cade Klubnik was supposed to be the answer, and after the way he played, to end last year, if you're a Clemson fan, you thought that this year your offense could be better, and you brought in Garrett Riley as your offensive coordinator from TCU, and he's known as a great offensive mind. At TCU and SMU, they have really good offensive production when he was there. So Clemson was obviously thinking that. Dabble was thinking that. But obviously in the first game, it didn't show. And they had, 3 turnovers. And I think more so than anything was that they kept shooting themselves in the foot offensively. They were getting to the red zone. Now, the first half, they were barely moving the ball at all. They could barely pass the 50 in the first half. It was tough sledding in that first half. But in the second half, they were starting to move the ball a little bit more. And it was still like a struggle and still methodically. They weren't having any explosive plays. There still wasn't anything flashy, anything that, was super impressive. But they were methodically moving the ball down the field. And they were able to get to the goal line a few times. But what kept happening? They fumbled twice. And those are things that were unforced. There was nothing that Duke did there to make Clemson turn the ball over. And Clemson's offensive line was sketch all game. It was not great. They looked very young and inexperienced and were getting beat a lot. And I think that was also part of the problem in the passing game, is that Cade Klubnik was having to scramble, roll out, and just wasn't having enough time to make reads or wait for guys to get open. And it doesn't help when your receivers aren't creating separation. So there was just a lot of problems. They looked completely out of sorts. Outside of Will Shipley, they weren't getting much offensive production in the game. And it just looked very concerning. It looked even worse than they did last year with Clemson. And they went, 11-3 last year. You would think they were terrible, but they went 11-3. But by Clemson standards, it was an off year. It just was not impressive. And it comes now. You look at people looking at Clemson. Is the whole dynasty, Dabble dynasty, is the Clemson's run as the ACC's best team, is that over? I mean, after last night, I would say so, because it's not just one game. It's been the last few years. Clemson went 10-3, didn't make the ACC title game in 2021. Last year, won the ACC, but went 11-3. They had a chance to still get into the playoff, though, but they lost their final regular season game to South Carolina, which put them at 10-2, but they won the ACC title game, and then they lost to Tennessee in the bowl game. And I was concerned because, Tennessee was with Joe Milton, not Hendon Hooker. And Tennessee, that was a team that was also trying to vie for the playoff, and, that didn't work out for them. And they had a lot of backups in that game against Clemson, and they still beat Clemson pretty handily. And Clemson didn't have any offensive flow in that game. So Dabo has got to adapt with this Clemson program and be more willing to accept guys from the transfer portal, go into the transfer portal, because the way he's doing it right now, it's like Clemson's falling behind some of these other programs now, and it's been a trend over the last few years. And you want to give them the benefit of the doubt because of how great they've been over the past decade, but it's starting to get to a point where you're concerned about if this program is going in the right direction. Quarterback Riley Leonard for Duke was really good, though. He didn't have a great passing game, and that he's a guy that a lot of people were talking about for the NFL draft because of his arm. But what really he showed yesterday was his, legs. He had a rushing touchdown that put them up 13-7. He had 98 rushing yards. He played really good, and he was, there was a lot of plays where obviously Clemson's defense was allowing him to scramble and get a first down with his legs, and he would do it every time. And so you got to give him credit. He played great. Like I said, Duke just was more physical. They knew, they could sense that there was just something in the air. And Clemson had missed a field goal early in that game, and when they did that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like they might lose this game, and Lord behold, they lost. So yeah, Clemson starts their season 0-1. They fall from number 9 to number 25 in the AP poll. They shouldn't be ranked, but hey, we'll see how they look in 2 weeks when they play Florida State. Hopefully they look better by then, but it is a long way to go with them. Let's move on. We have the biggest game of the weekend in terms of, I guess, the rankings. The game that was highlighted the most, LSU and Florida State. LSU came in ranked number 5. Florida State came in ranked number 8. This was a sloppy game at first. LSU was getting down the field early, but they weren't capitalizing in the red zone. They had a few red zone opportunities that they missed out on. And their first, when they would get to the red zone, they weren't able to get anything going. They weren't able to contain that Florida State defensive line, which is very good, one of the best in the country. They weren't able to run the ball up the gut, and they weren't getting anything in the passing game. So they just weren't able to capitalize on opportunities, and Florida State was able to stay in the game despite them having a really sloppy first half. They had a lot of penalties, a lot of miscues. They had like an interception that Jordan Travis threw. It was just not a pretty first half, but Florida State was only down 17-14 at half, if I recall. But the second half, Florida State just, man, they took off, and they were amazing in that second half. They outscored LSU 31-7 in the second half. They looked like the much better team. They completely dominated LSU at the line of scrimmage, completely more physical. They were just bullying LSU. LSU couldn't get anything going in that second half. The momentum changed so quickly, and Keon Coleman was a big part of that. He had 9 receptions for 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was just catching so many big time, balls, and he had a few touchdown catches that were like, they were jump balls basically. He came down with them, and those type of plays will spark momentum so much, and they got Florida State going. And like I said, the crowd was into it. It was basically a home game for Florida State since it was in Orlando, and Florida State just never relinquished that energy and that dominance they were putting on. And LSU looked out of sorts. Jaden Daniels didn't have it going. A lot of people were really wondering why Harold Perkins, was not lining up as one of the 4 men up front. He was a lot of times back in coverage, which a lot of people didn't seem to understand, because he's one of the best pass rushers in college football, probably the best. And he can beat anybody easily, so you would think it would help to have him rushing the passer. But apparently, Brian Kelly has something different, or their defensive coordinator has something different in mind. But this is a team in Florida State that came into the year with so much hype. We all thought that they had a shot at making the playoff. They brought in a lot of great talent in the transfer portal, most notably Keon Coleman, who ended up, making things happen in this game. It was a difference maker. Jordan Travis, another year in this offense. He showed plenty of flashes last year, made a lot of improvement, but, he just looked so mature in that second half. First half, he definitely was, not perfect, but, again, he didn't lose them the game in that first half. He still remained solid, calm, composed, and in the second half, it just took off. And this Florida State offense just caught fire. And I think Florida State, you have to look at the way Clemson played. I know North Carolina looked impressive, and I will get to them. Duke looked nice against, Clemson. But if you're Florida State, you have to think the ACC is ours this year. There is nobody that has the talent that we have. And I think Florida State might be back. Mike Norvell, you got to give him a lot of credit for what he has built there so far in such a short period of time. Florida State has been down, ever since, about like 2015. They just have not been that national championship contending type of program. Well, now it looks like they might be back to that. And it was very interesting to see how they performed against LSU. LSU definitely gonna have to go back to the drawing board. They lost to FSU to start the year last year too, and they rebounded well from it, but they didn't get blown out last year. And this year they got physically manhandled. So we will see how they respond. They're still a very talented team. I would bet that they're still gonna win about 9 to 10 games. So gonna be interesting. But Florida State definitely a top 3 team as of right now, in my opinion, just based off what they showed. I think you got to give that to them. So very interesting game there. Let's move on. Deion Sanders made his debut at Colorado. Everyone was hyped for this. It was a Fox Big Noon game against the number 17 TCU Horned Frogs, who just went to the national championship game. Colorado was a 20-point underdog. Nobody expected them to win this game. And it was a game that you just want to see if Colorado can hang close. If you could see flashes that give you hope that this team has potential going forward. Well, they showed more than that. They went out there and they won 45-42. Shadir Sanders throws for 510 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dylan Edwards, 5 receptions for 135 yards, 3 touchdowns. Travis Hunter, goodness gracious, dude was everywhere. I mean, his draft stock just skyrocketed after this, and he might be number 1 on the Heisman board after 1 week. He was so impressive. I mean, the amount of knowledge you have to be able to know the entire offense and to know the entire defense and play the entire game, the stamina you have to have, the endurance. I mean, he was going through so much to stay in that game and make plays happen, and he was making so many impact plays. I mean, he had one bad play where he dropped a potential touchdown, but he made up for it. I mean, he had 11 receptions, he had an INT, he had 109 receiving yards. His hands were all over this game, and you got to give him credit for the type of effort he put forward. Colorado outgained TCU 565 yards to 541 yards, and they were 9-15 on third down, which was very key. They were going blow for blow with this TCU unit, and neither team was able to get a stop. And TCU, obviously, Chandler Morris is their starting quarterback now, but they had a lot of turnover from that national championship team. So this was not the same team, but it's still a program that went to the national championship game last year and still has some of those players back, the same coach, same coaching staff for the most part. And a team that like in a crowd that was hyped for TCU football because of what they did last year. It wasn't going to be an easy environment to go win in, and the hype behind the game because it's Deion's debut. I mean, Colorado went out there and exceeded all expectations in their first game, and now I think everyone is a true believer in what Deion can build there and what they can do as soon as this season. I mean, a lot of people felt like Deion was going to build something, but this season was going to be a struggle. Well, shit. I mean, we were wrong. The talent on this roster is very obvious. I mean, their skill players are ridiculous. And the main thing that was the problem with Colorado for everybody was how would they match up at the line of scrimmage? Well, I think they did a solid job, and they were getting the ball out quick a lot of different times to allow, to make it easier on the offensive line. But Shadir Sanders, his poise, his ability to see if someone's coming towards him, feel that presence of someone rushing him, and get out in time and make a throw or just get a few yards. And he was so poised, so calm, so cool and collected, and you got to give him a lot of credit because he managed this game so well and he made the throws. I mean, his accuracy was amazing. He wasn't forcing anything. I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit. He played amazing, and Colorado looks like the real deal. And I mean, they play a really tough schedule this year. They have Nebraska this week. Nebraska's not an easy team to beat, despite the fact that they have been losing a lot of close games over the last few years. Colorado still knows that Nebraska's going to come out there and give them a good game. Nebraska's a team that just falters late in games, but they're always in games. They always play well throughout the entire game, and that's a rivalry game. So there's going to be bad blood there. There's going to be both fan bases coming together in Boulder. It should be an intense game, but Colorado, I mean, with the schedule they have, if they can just win 7 to 8 games, I think you feel good about the first year. I mean, I think after what we saw against TCU, 7 to 8 games is reasonable, especially 7. I mean, a bowl game should be the expectation for now, based off what we saw. We saw what this team's capable of against a good opponent, and their offense was amazing. Their defense is obviously going to have to improve because they were giving up virtually anything to TCU that they wanted, but they got some key stops. Early in the game, it was really important to establish an identity on defense and show that, like, hey, you're not just going to push us around. And that was huge. And that helped with some of the confidence I feel like that the offense had coming back on the field, because their defense got to stop first. And then, offense, has a little more trust in that defense. And then late in the game, they got stops that they needed for Colorado to be able to win the game. So I think you got to give them a lot of credit. And Colorado's going to be a team to watch all season. Probably the team of the season. Just with all the media hype around them, they're going to be on national TV every week, and I am going to be glued to my TV whenever they're on, so I can't wait to watch the rest of the season and see what else they do. Let's move on. Another ACC versus SEC game. This was where College Game Day was. North Carolina versus South Carolina in Charlotte. These two teams, came in. We felt like this was a pretty evenly matched game, and it started out that way. Both teams were going back and forth. It was just like the Colorado TCU game. I mean, there wasn't a clear separation between any of the two. Drake May played a solid first half. He was just making so many great throws. I mean, Drake May is obviously going to be one of the top picks in the NFL draft this year, for good reason, because his accuracy is amazing. And a lot of people compare him to Joe Burrow and just different guys like that. He has the talent to lift North Carolina and lift any receivers that are around him, elevate them. And I think that's something that makes him so great. It's like when you can elevate guys as a quarterback, that is something special. And that's not something every quarterback can do. They need guys around him to be great. Drake May can make guys around him great while he's great. So he was amazing. 269 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have 2 interceptions in the second half. It wasn't his prettiest game, but he was still good. In the first half, like, North Carolina was in the lead because of him, and you got to give him a lot of credit for how he played. This game, though, what it really came down to me is the third down and fourth downs. North Carolina was 9 of 15 on third and fourth down. South Carolina was 4 of 18. So they just couldn't extend drives. And when you can't extend drives, you're constantly putting your defense back on the field. It's going to start to play at your psyche, and it's really hard to recover from that. You have got to be able to extend those drives on those third downs and fourth downs, and sometimes you can't go for it because you're on your side of the field, so it's tough to even fathom going for it on a fourth down when you're at your own 25-yard line. So that is why that's why I think the game came down to that. North Carolina dominated South Carolina's offensive line, 9 sacks on the night. I mean, Spencer Rattler had no time in the pocket. He still managed to throw for 300 yards, but he had no time in the pocket. And I mean, you could tell he was frustrated by that because, guys, I need time in the pocket to make shit happen. And I think, they had no run game because of that. And so they were very one-dimensional. And all those sacks were just, like, they sped everything up that Spencer Rattler wanted to do. So, it was a very impressive showing. I thought South Carolina would win the game. I didn't think that it was a foregone conclusion, but I expected South Carolina to win the game. But North Carolina proved they are the much better team right now. And Drake May and that offense, they were good, but what really stuck out to me was that defense, because North Carolina a year ago was one of the worst defenses in the Power 5. I mean, they were not a good defense last year in any facet. So they had to win a lot of games by scoring a lot of points. And from what I saw the other day, it could either be South Carolina's offensive line is going to get them into a lot of trouble in the SEC and they're going to lose a lot of games because of it, or North Carolina's defense is just dramatically improved and they're going to be a much better team because of it. And after the week has passed, they look like the second best team in the ACC right now. So good win for North Carolina in a neutral site environment. And Mac Brown and that team going to have a good season, hopefully. Let's move on. Ohio State. They were ugly. I mean, it was real ugly. Kyle McCord, in his first start as Ohio State quarterback, trying to replace C.J. Stroud, he only threw for 239 yards. Ohio State's offense was abysmal. I mean, at least by their standards. 5.7 yards per play, 380 total yards, and 2 of 12 on third down. And Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka, they're two of the top receivers, probably the best wide receiver tandem in the country, combined for 5 receptions and 34 yards. I mean, that is ridiculous. And they was frustrated on the bench because why are we not getting the ball? Why are you not seeing? I mean, those guys are great at creating separation, especially against Indiana. It's Indiana at the end of the day. I'm not saying Indiana's not a good team this year. So Ohio State should have been a lot more dominant than they were. Their defense was tremendous. They literally gave Indiana nothing all game. I mean, even though the offense was so bad, you never felt like Indiana actually was going to win the game because Ohio State's defense was tremendous. Defensive line and the secondary, they locked everything Indiana wanted to do up. And Indiana just had a tough time with that. But Ohio State's offense looked very concerning because this is usually a team that is an explosive offense, and they have the talent, and they have great quarterback play. I mean, you've had guys like Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, C.J. Stroud, Braxton Miller, J.T. Barrett. I mean, endless names. And to now you're with Kyle McCord. I like to think he'll still figure it out as the season progresses because it was his first game. So I don't want to be too harsh. But it was not a good first showing because it just you look at the teams on their schedule: Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State. All those teams are physical, and all those teams just are great defensively and are going to be tough teams to stop and play against. And 3 of the 4 of those games are on the road. And with the way Penn State looked, the way Michigan looked, the way Notre Dame looked, I mean, all those teams I could see all of them beating Ohio State right now. So Ohio State has a lot to improve upon. Their offensive line is going to have to play better, but the one positive is that their defense was tremendous, and you can look at that as a positive. But they're going to have to get that offense going. Kyle McCord has got to see the guys. He's got to be able to make the throws, and they're going to have to trust him to make the throws because, I mean, it didn't even look like they trusted him to. They were just trying to lean on the run game because, they didn't trust Kyle McCord. And the passing game looked a little sloppy. So hopefully Ohio State gets better, but at least they got the win, and that's what's most important. They play Notre Dame in week 4. Next 2 weeks, they have 2 kind of, games that they should win fairly easily, cupcakes. So I think they'll be fine until the Notre Dame game. But when they play Notre Dame, that is when we're going to really see what this team's about. But by then, they should have this offense figured out a little bit more. And if they don't, then that's concerning. But let's move on. Penn State, they played West Virginia. Penn State's a team that came into this year ranked number 7. Coming off an 11-2 year where they won the Rose Bowl, but they lost Sean Clifford, their starting quarterback, as he graduated. And you're bringing in Drew Allar, and this is a guy that a lot of Penn State fans were very excited for, and he delivered. He had 325 passing yards for 3 touchdowns. The offense just had more juice than it had last season. And Penn State, the biggest thing for them has just been quarterback play. At least since Trace McSorley left, can they find a quarterback that's dynamic, that can make the throws, that can make the right reads? Sean Clifford was good, but he was limited, and that limited Penn State's ability to be able to win the Big Ten because of that. They've always had the great receivers and great on the defensive and offensive line, great backs. They have everything. They always seem to be at least the past few years they've been the quarterback play has not been at an elite level that it needs to be for them to win at the elite level. Drew Allar looked elite in this game, and early it was they weren't in great sync, but as the game progressed, they got more comfortable. They kind of just started shutting everything down West Virginia wants to do. West Virginia was getting some stuff here on the ground that I think Penn State will have to clean up. They're going to have to be able to stop a lot of those little 6 to 8 yard rushes that West Virginia was getting. But other than that, I thought their defense was great. And Keandre Lambert-Smith, he had 4 receptions for 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was their standout receiver. It's going to be interesting to see if him and Allar have more of a connection as the season progresses, because Lambert-Smith looked like the best receiver for Penn State. And Singleton and Allen in the backfield were tremendous. And Penn State's going to be a team that's going to be able to run the ball. But you wanted to see the passing game show flashes and show potential, and they did. And albeit it's against West Virginia. West Virginia's not a great team, but it's a Power 5 opponent. It's a big game. I mean, it's still impressive to me. But you wanted to see Drew Allar show potential, and he did. He was poised, and 7.4 yards per play for this Penn State offense. I think that was a great first game for them, a 38-15 win. I did not like, though, how they tried to add on that extra touchdown at the end. I was just like, just kneel the ball. I don't get that, but James Franklin's response was, I wanted to have my second stringers, getting an opportunity to play. Sure, but like I feel like you could have just kneeled the ball, and but it is what it is. But yeah, Penn State 38-15, looking like a real threat going forward in the Big Ten. Some other games I want to recap real quick are out in the Pac-12. Boise and Washington State. Michael Penix had a Heisman type level game. 29-40, 450 yards, 5 touchdowns. 5 different receivers caught a touchdown, and Washington's offense went for 568 total yards. The receiving core looked great. Michael Penix deep ball is so pretty. And Washington looked legit. And that's a good Boise team. Boise's a respectable program. Probably going to win the Mountain West, or be at least in the running to win that Mountain West Conference. And Boise started out this game with some momentum. They looked good early. And Washington, the offense did not get going until late in that first quarter. But once it got going, they never stopped throwing. Michael Penix, like I said, the Heisman moment in that game. And he's going to be a guy that when the NFL draft comes, I need more people to pay attention to him, because his arm talent's ridiculous. He has great arm talent, and I think that's something you got to pay attention to. And this is a Washington team that can win the Pac-12, and it can be a serious playoff threat, so keep paying attention to them. And the last thing I want to cover is Caleb Williams. He had 319 total passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and USC's dominated Nevada. Granted, Nevada, but they dominated. They looked better than they did in week 0 against San Jose State. Only gave up 14 points in this game. Only allowed like 300-something yards to Nevada. Not great, but it was a lot better than what they did in week 0 against San Jose State. The offense obviously looked great. Caleb Williams, magician, moving around in the pocket, scrambling, evading tacklers. Like his accuracy, everything, his accuracy on the move, his ability to just not be taken down to the ground. I mean, he's so elusive. You got to give him so much credit for his ability. USC obviously has not played anyone so far, and they don't play anybody until really, September 30th when they play Colorado. But it was still good to see them come out and dominate the way that they did. And you got to be impressed with Caleb Williams and that offense. It's going to be a fun team to watch in the Pac-12, obviously. And it was a great week of football, like I said. All these games were very exciting. Tell me down below what games stood out to you the most, or what stood out to you the most, some takeaways you have, because it was a very eventful week. And the games of the week that I'm going to be most excited to watch this week: Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, NC State, Ole Miss, Tulane. Those are just a few of the ones. I'm trying to think of some other ones off the top of my head. I would say Utah, Baylor, Oregon, Texas Tech, but Texas Tech and Baylor both shit the bed against Group of 5 opponents last week. Texas Tech lost to Wyoming in double overtime. Texas State dominated Baylor, got whatever they want offensively on them. Baylor fans are not pleased, so it's a bad sign there for Dave Aranda and Waco. If it would be huge if he won this game against Utah this week, but I doubt he does. But yeah, those are some of the games I'm excited to see, and it's gonna be a great week of football. But yeah, this is week 1 recap. I will be doing this every week, and yeah, let me know what you guys think. It's been Will Sports. Peace.